Chat, here we go. Yes. So tell me where you're all from. Before we jump into it, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from today. I know we've got a lot of people from the UK in here. Tell me where you're from. Wow, South Africa. Amazing. Toronto, Bristol, Scotland. Oh my God, so many places. USA. Oh, I love this. Mexico. Oh my God, I wish I was in Mexico right now. Amazing. Lake District, Cyprus, Bristol, Leeds. That's fantastic. All over. That is amazing. USA, Estonia, Essex, Hannah. I'm in Essex as well. Really amazing. Brentwood down the road, USA, Australia. Amazing. Oh, fantastic. Trinidad, France. We've got so many of you. Thank you guys for tuning in. I feel like a lot of people struggle with this topic, so I'm really looking forward to giving you this free education. And, I'm not going to gatekeep anything. It's going to be, I feel like you're going to learn a lot, and I really, really want you to get involved, ask as many questions as you can, and it's going to be a really good live. So we'll talk in the chat box. We are going to do a lot of Q&As. There's a question box at the bottom of your screen called Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout the live, please put them in the Q&A, and then we're going to be running through all of your questions. This is a pigmentology webinar, so I know a lot of topics do cross over, like color theory, machines and techniques, but we need to keep this specifically based on pigmentology, so we are not going to get sidetracked. There's a lot to get through. We've got like over 100 pages on this webinar, so we need to keep on track and keep to the topic. Okay, so pigmentology. Yes, let's get into it. So this is going to be all about pigmentology, and it's not going to be brand specific, which I think is extremely important, because as we know, there's a million different brands out there, but in the nitty gritty of it, the colorants are pretty much the same. So it's going to be non-brand specific, which is going to help you with any brand that you're using. This information is going to be useful. Make an emoji or in the chat, tell us, do you find this topic to be a bit of a minefield? Tell us in the chat. When you think of pigmentology, does it just make your brain explode? Obviously, there's all these different brands coming out now. I want you to tell me, do you struggle with this topic? It's forever changing as well. Like when I first started in 2014, it's different. So you constantly have to evolve and stay on top of it. So we're going to get into it today. So the topics that we are going to cover today are what is in our inks and our pigments, SDS sheets, CI codes, popular colorants, organics, inorganics and hybrids, carrier agents and viscosity, color bias, and also you're going to get a special PM Uni offer as well. So we're going to cover all of these topics today. So starting off, let's talk about our PMU inks, okay? So these PMU inks, you can see here, you should be familiar with these PMU inks. A lot of, some of them are tattoo inks. Again, our world is sort of crossing over a little bit, but you've got Hanafi, Monica Ravani, world famous Biotech, Tina Davies, Permablend, Ever After. Again, mind exploding. I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible for you to understand all of these inks, okay? Some of them are connected. So sometimes you've got to step back and understand where your pigment has come from or where they're made or manufactured, all right? So we have world famous ink. This is a massive company, world famous ink. Lou Rubino owns this company and he owns world famous ink. Sometimes I do use world famous ink, especially for like dark neutralization clients, but what is important is understanding that particular ink and what is in that particular pigment. So world famous ink, Blue Rubino. Then you have underneath the umbrella, you have Permablend, okay? So Anne-Marie and Lou Rubino, sorry, are brother and sister. So Lou Rubino owns World Famous Ink. Anne-Marie is a sister. She then opened up Permablend, but it's all made in the same factory and it's all manufactured the same. So there is definitely a link there. Permablend is pretty much a blend of inks. There is not much that is pigment. Well, it is pigment, but it's not very soft. So you need to make that correlation that World Famous Ink have made Permablend, and it's a blend of inks. Then underneath Permablend, we have our artist series. For example, Tina Davies. You've got the Luxe range, like Sculpted have just brought out a new Luxe range. You've got Even Flow, and then you've also got, you know, other brands, other artists, sorry, that have made their brand within Permablend. They are all Permablend, which stems from World Famous Ink. So it's all in the same sort of family. So step one is understanding that. And when you're using Permablend, knowing that it is extremely permanent, hence the name. All right. Did you guys know that already? Pop that in the chat. I'd love to know. Okay, yes, good. I'm just gonna, yes, you knew that. Good. Okay. So then we have Eternalink. Eternalink, we have connections as well. Eternalink is connected to Ever After, which I love using Ever After for lips. We're gonna get more into that as we go along. But again, it's all connected. You have artist series like Jess Yang, Liz Cook, Motor City, and Mike Chambers all have sort of a ranges stemming from Eternalink. Then we have more of your softer ranges like LI. Again, you have your artist series from LI. So if you're using Monica Ravani or Will Anthony, they are made by LI. Okay, that's step one. So let's get into what actually are pigments and inks. So when we're using a pigment, what are they? So we have a pigment powder and a carrier agent. The only way to get pigment into the skin is having a liquid carrier agent to get the pigment powder in the skin. That is the only way we can get it in there. So we have a pigment powder and we have a liquid carrier agent. But it's not as simple as that, as we know. So we have organic colorants and we have inorganic colorants. Then the carrier agents, we have different types of carrier agents. We have aqua, which is water, glycerin, alcohol, and rosin, which is just some of the popular carrier agents. There is so many more, but these are the ones that you will see most of in your inks. Going more in detail about that, we have our inorganic powders, which are going to be our iron oxides, which are more muted and earthy. We have larger molecule sizes and they consist of metals and minerals. So we're going to get a bit more into the logistics further into the webinar, but understanding that your inorganics is the opposite of food. So when you think of organic, you think of healthy and, you know, no chemicals. It's sort of the opposite for permanent makeup. So when we say inorganic, it doesn't mean that it's bad or, you know, it's not good for us. It's just where it comes from. So it's mostly from metals and minerals. The particle sizes are larger and the actual color is not as vivid and bright. It's usually more earthy and dusky in the skin, and that's the color that it looks like. So again, we're going to get a bit more into the logistics of that as we go along, but that is the basics understanding inorganics. Inorganics are still synthetically produced because standardization, you can't just get a rock and grind it up and tattoo it into someone's skin. Inorganics are still synthetically produced. Then we have organic pigment powder. So organic pigment powder, again, it doesn't mean it is no chemicals. It's more bright, vivid colors. we have smaller particle sizes, and this consists of carbon rings and chains. So this is going to influence massively the final effect and how this goes into the skin. There is not one wrong or one right thing to use. We're going to go more into that as we go along. It's just important to understand the difference. So organics are more bright and vivid, smaller particles, and inorganics are the opposite. So larger molecule sizes, more dull and earthy. So let's move on to viscosity. So viscosity is defined as resistant to flow. So when we are using our pigments and our inks, you probably found that some brands are more thicker and some are more thin, more water-like. Depending on the brand and depending what you're using will depend on the viscosity of the pigment. So going a bit more into that, we have low viscosity, which means sort of like water, more thin, more liquid, and you have high viscosity, which is thicker, more of a sort of a syrupy honey sort of texture. So this is going to massively influence how the pigment is implanted into the skin. And again, there's not a right or wrong one. It depends on personal preference and what you're doing, what skin you're working on, what you're trying to achieve. I use both of these, it just very much depends on what you're trying to do. But understanding viscosity is low, is like water, thin, high is more thicker, okay? So a bit more into that now. So if we relate that back to our carrier agents that we have in our permanent makeup inks, low viscosity would be alcohol and aqua, so water. Alcohol and aqua and water are very watery, very liquid-like. So if you have a pigment that has a lot of alcohol and aqua, your pigment is going to be extremely thin and it's going to jump in the skin, extremely easy. Whereas if you have a pigment that has high glycerin or rosin, these are thick and high viscosity. So that means that it's not going to jump in the skin as quickly as something that is a low viscosity. Again, depends what you're doing. There is not a wrong or right one. But when you don't really understand the basics of all of this and you jump from different brands to different brands, they are very different. So if you jump from Hanafi to Monaco Ravani, they're extremely different. The viscosity is either end of the spectrum. So I believe that understanding this will help you understand what you need to use in certain situations. Okay. So I'm going to carry on going a bit more. If you do have questions, guys, make sure that you're putting them in the Q&A box. When I finish this section, I'm going to go to the Q&A and we're going to answer all of your questions, okay? In the chat box, what will enter, I've sort of given it away, but let's see if you're listening. What will enter the skin easier, high or low viscosity? Low, 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 low. You're all listening. Yes, you're getting it. Low, 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 low. Very good. Yes, low viscosity is going to enter the skin extremely easy. Okay, brilliant. So let's move on. So let's jump in a bit more about the carrier agents, because when I started to really go into this and understand each individual brand and what is used, it started to click for me to understand what I need to use and what I don't want to use in certain people. So if we dive into the carrier agent, that would be aqua and water. So pretty much all of your pigments and inks will contain aqua or water, okay? It's the levels of that which is going to influence this. So if aqua is at the top of the list, it's going to be extremely watery. So aqua is contained in pretty much all pigments. It's going to evaporate while you are working. So if you have a brand that has a lot of aqua in, you'll find that it dries out extremely quickly. especially in the pigment part, you'll find that it doesn't, you know, it doesn't stay very wet. It does dry out very quick, and it will go into the skin extremely easy. If the brand says they have aqua in their pigment rather than water, that means it's hard water. Okay, so a brand that has quite a high aqua is Hanami. It does go into the skin really, really easy. But again, all pigments will have aqua in there. It just depends on the list of where it will be. Then we have alcohol. So alcohol is in some pigments, but this has been banned from EU REACH. So if you are in the EU, your pigments will not contain this anymore. It will contain something else. They would have swapped it out and they would put something in replace of this. But if you have a pigment that has alcohol in the composition, this will allow the pigment to enter the skin even more easier. So if you have aqua and alcohol, it's going to jump in the skin extremely easy. So it's also an astringent, so a chemical that shrinks or constricts body tissue. It's also a solvent, so it's able to dissolve other substances. And it does also prevent the pigment from spoiling as well, which is great for our pigments. But I do stress that this does implant extremely easy. So a lot of the time, your tattoo inks, World Famous, Eternal Ink, they're going to have high alcohol content in there, which is going to make it very long lasting as well, and it does jump in the skin. So again, it's not a wrong or right thing, it's just what are you trying to achieve. So World Famous ink has a lot of alcohol in there, which does help it to be very, very permanent, whereas other ranges in PMU, not so much. Glycerin is in pretty much all of your permanent makeup inks. Again, it depends on the levels. A pigment brand that has very, very high glycerin is Mara. So if anyone has used Mara, you'll find this is extremely creamy and thick. So it's not so liquidy now. It's going to be thicker than water. So we know that. It's going to be quite viscous. It helps the ink from not drying out. So if you're working for like 2-3 hours, this won't really be dried out. You can also test these pigments on the skin a bit easier. So when you're testing it on the skin, you won't find that it dries out instantly. It will stay on the skin quite wet, and it doesn't jump in the skin as easy. And we know that because we know it's not extremely thin. Again, which is not a bad thing. It depends what you're doing. I like to use a lot of glycerin-based pigments for eyebrows because I don't like my brows to be extremely permanent. I want it to be a bit more creamy, a bit more forgiving. But again, all pigments will have glycerin in there at some point, but if it's higher up, like Mara is right at the top, you know that it's going to be more thicker and more creamy. Rosin is a carrier agent that is not in all of your inks. But if you see that it's in your inks, which we're going to get to, how you can see that it's in your inks, it's a very sticky carrier agent. So I find that brands that have rosin as well as aqua and alcohol are going to be extremely long lasting. It's going to jump in the skin and it's going to retain very, very well. And a brand that has rosin in there is Hanafi. I'm not sure if any of you use Hanafi. I love Hanafi for lips. It's a really amazing brand. But just know that it creates a sticky sort of consistency in the skin. So you're going to get very high retention and it's going to jump in the skin quite well. It does also regulate viscosity as well. So if you have a brand that has a lot of aqua, they may put a bit of rosin in there to make it not so watery. But again, it depends on the ratios that's in there. It will also reduce dripping and splattering on the ink. Okay, so there's a little quiz now that I want you guys to do. We're going to do this little quiz and then I'm going to go to your questions. Scott is going to grab the quiz up and he's going to pop that on your screen, quiz number 1, in a second. Go through there's only 3, so I want you to go through these and tell me what you think. What do you think? I'm going to go through the chat while this is going on. This is fun, isn't it? I like doing this. Hi, Tina. I can see you in the chat. Yeah, great that you've mentioned that. So isoprene alcohol is not REACH compliant, but ethanol alcohol is. So that is the substitute. So thank you, Tina. Love that. I hope you're well. Love Hanafi for eyeliner. I love Hanafi for eyeliner. It's brilliant. We're going to get to that later on. Oh, thanks, Amy. I'm having so much fun. I've done so many pigment courses and already have learned so much. Oh, thank you, guys. You're making me blush. Right, let's go to the quiz. Let's see how it's getting on. Very good. Okay, so number 1, what does low viscosity mean? Yes, more liquid, faster flow. Good. A lot of you got 93% of you got that right. Organic pigment powder is bright, vivid, small particle size, carbon chains. 93% if you got that right. So that's amazing. And then the last one, pigments containing alcohol will enter the skin very easy. 95% smashed it. Well done, guys. That's really, really good. So I'm going to end that poll now. Okay, share the results. I'm going to jump to the Q&A. Okay, so let's have a little look at this. Natalia, I'm going to answer your question live. Okay, so would you suggest to use low viscosity pigments for oily skin? It depends on what you're doing. So it depends on, I'm just going to go back so we can get on what we're talking about. So viscosity, low viscosity pigments for oily skin. It depends. It depends. I personally, for eyebrows, I like to use more glycerin based pigments because I prefer the soft to heal. So I'll just layer in and build up more saturation of color. But, you know, it's personal preference. It's quite hard to say, do this, do that. It will go in easier and it will make your life easier, yes. But typically with low viscosity pigments, usually they are organic. So we're going to get more into that as we go along, okay? But it's personal preference. I personally prefer to do more high viscosity for eyebrows. Okay, that one's done. Let me just read a few more of these questions. Okay, Rachel, I'm going to do yours live. If a product is high viscosity, do you just need to work the pigment in more to get a good lasting result? Yes, correct. So typically, if you have a high viscosity pigment, an example would be Tina Davies' new Fade. It's a bit more thicker. You know, you've got Monica Ravani's a bit more thicker, Biotech. Typically, again, it's inorganics that are a bit more thicker. So you do have to work them in more to get them to retain. So I use more low viscosity pigments for lips and eyeliner. So eyebrows, I prefer a bit more of a high viscosity. So Gem, is it aqua or water at the top of the list if it's thicker or thinner? So aqua is water. So aqua is water, depends on the brand. Some brands will call it aqua, some brands will call it water. So if that is on the top of the list, that is going to be thin. So when we get into the SDS sheets, I'm going to show you how you can understand what is most in that pigment because it will be at the top. So if it's at the top, that is what's most in there. Okay, so it will be thinner. Okay, sorry if I can't pronounce your name. I'm just going to call you Ash. Okay. What is chrome oxide? Chrome oxide is green. So chrome oxide, let me go back. Oh, chrome oxide is green. Okay, so it's an oxide. Your red, your yellow, and your black inorganics are iron oxides, and the green is called a chrome oxide. So it's just the color green, okay? Chrome oxide is in a lot of eyebrow pigments, and I'm gonna show you that when we go into that. And the substitute to the alcohol is the ethanol, which is what Tina said earlier. Okay. Kate, can you add glycerin to low viscosity brands? You can if you want to. You can thicken it up. You can just buy glycerin. Obviously, you need to make sure that you're buying it from the correct place. So you can if you want to, but then you might as well just use something else. So if you are going to try and thicken up a low viscosity brand, you might as well just use something that is high viscosity, if that makes sense. But you can if you could do that. It's just the same as sort of using your dilutant, which is typically aqua, to dilute and thin the pigment. So if you have a brand that is very thick and you're struggling to work with it, you can dilute to make it more liquid, but that will take down the potency of the heel because you're diluting the pigment particles as well. Okay. I'm going to do one more question now. Let me see. I've done that one. We've done that one. I'm just trying to find a different one. Sorry, guys. Does it mean that organic ones are usually less viscous? Yes. Yes. So it was sort of all linked together. Our organic brands are typically more liquid. Yes, that is correct. Okay, great. All right, I'm going to move on now because we've got a lot to get through. I'm just going to check the chat to make sure you're all okay. Yes, you all right? Yes. Yeah, the replay, if you want the replay to this, it will be available on the subscription. We are going to touch on neutralization, but again, this is pigmentology. We're not going to get into techniques, okay? For lips, I prefer low viscous. We're going to get into that a bit more into the presentation, okay? So I'm going to move on now, guys, all right? We got a lot to get through. So let's now talk about color index. So color index, you should all sort of get familiar with this now. A lot of our brands are showing the color index on the color charts. It's available in most different places. So color index is a number classification that relates to a specific color. Each colorant has its own CI number. So color index is CI, that's the abbreviation. And the CI will give us the information as to whether the colorant is inorganic or organic. So it will describe the color and the chemical class. Here are some, not all of them, here are some popular colorants. You will be getting this download sheet for free if you stay at the end. This took me ages to make, guys, by the way. It took me ages to make. I wanted to give you something that will be, again, non-brand specific. So you can do some due diligence on the pigments that you're using and you can cross-reference this and you can see the exact CI and you can see the overall color of that. So let's just look a bit more in detail on this screen. So we have our inorganic colorants on the first row here. We haven't got a lot of inorganics. You can see we've got black, red, yellow, and chrome oxide and titanium dioxide white. These are all inorganic colorants. They have their own CI number. So for example, inorganic black, iron oxide black 11 is CI 77499. And that will not change. So you can cross-reference that with what you're using and you can see what is in your inks. We have red 101, 77491. So these are the only inorganic colorants that we have in PMU. These are only, it's a very handful of organic pigments here, colorants. So for example, let's take red 254, CI 56110. That is an organic colorant. And we can see that because of the CI number. So if you look on the bottom of your screen, you've got a little code there. So if a colorant has a CI number, which is 77000 and above, that means it's an inorganic colorant. If it's below that number, that means it's an organic. So by looking at the CI numbers, you can understand if it's an organic or if it's an inorganic. You can also notice the actual color of the colorant. For example, if we compare the red 254 to the red 101, the organic colorant is much more vivid and bright compared to the dull, earthy, inorganic. So you can start to see a correlation between that. So what I've done here on this popular PMU colorants download is I have made it easy for you to here's a bigger version so you can see. So you've got all of the popular colorants. These are not all of the colorants. These are just some very popular reoccurring colorants throughout the whole brands that I'm working with. So you've got all of your reds at the top, and look how different all of the reds are. You've got red 170, which is a dull bluish red. And you've got red 254, which is extremely bright and vivid. It's more of an orange red. So you might be thinking, well, why do I need to know this? Well, why would you not need to know this? Because if you're using a pigment and you just see red 170, you're going to think, oh, red's a warm color. But actually that colorant is actually quite a cool red. So understanding that the color is not necessarily the temperature. Okay, we're not going to get too much into color theory, but you need to understand the different colorants in order to choose the correct colors for your clients. Also, there's a little key at the bottom of that page. So if we have a star next to or on the blob, that means it's EU REACH compliant. If it's not got a star on there, it's not EU REACH compliant. So then that way you can really see what is EU REACH and what's not. Okay, so you can see red 170 is EU REACH, but then red 22 underneath that is not EU REACH compliant. So that key should make it a bit more easy for you to understand. You've got the little triangle. So the little triangle is for laser. Okay, so we are finding that it's it's virtually impossible to get yellow out of the skin with the laser. You have to go more down the solution removal route. So you can see which ones are quite difficult to get out with laser. You've got your yellows, your greens as well down here. Titanium dioxide is not coming out with laser. That's a whole nother webinar in itself. But you also have your color index down there as well. Okay, but I just wanted to give you this because this is what's really going to help you very quickly determine if you're with a client and you just have this. You can print this out, you can download it, print it out, have it in your studio, and you can quickly see, okay, my pigment has got red 42, which is iron oxide yellow. You can see what sort of colorant and what temperature that is. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about, I'm just going to go into the chat here. Let's have a little look. Is everyone loving this? It's what's been missing in the PMU world. Love it. Stick it to the wall. I might have saved it as my screensaver on my phone. And you know what? I am absolutely, I'm a bit of a, I love getting into this sort of learning nitty gritty of the science behind it as well. So I feel like this is really going to help you. Next, let's talk a little bit about EU REACH while we're on the subject. So we do have some people in here that are from Europe. So let's talk about it. So the EU REACH is a regulation by the European Union that has been put into place to improve, human health and what is in our inks. This is only active in Europe. At the moment, UK is not in Europe. God knows what's going to happen in a minute. But for the time being, we are not included in this. But it's really important to understand this and that it's out there. So this got proposed in 2020. It's registration, evaluation, authorization of restriction of chemicals, which means that basically the short story of it is they banned colorants and some ingredients that we could use in inks. So again, this is only EU, but you know, we're seeing a lot of brands take this on, which is great. We do have a lot of brands now that is EU reach. So I just want to touch on some of the colorants that have been taken out. For example, let's look at the yellows. So we have the replaced non-EU reach compliant inks. So colorants, sorry, we have yellow 14 and we have yellow 97. So these have been taken out and they cannot be used in Europe, and they've replaced them with colors like yellow 138 and yellow 180. So if you are in the EU, you will see these colorants over these colorants. And then again, for your oranges, for example, orange 13 has been taken away, and then we have been replaced with orange 36 and orange 73. Okay. So if you are not in the EU, you can still buy EU reach compliant pigment brands. It just depends what you're doing, but we have the flexibility. Like if you're in America or Canada or UK, we can still buy everything. But if you're outside of that, then you can't. So it's important to be aware of that. Yeah. So some brands that are EU reach is you have the Luxe Perma Blend. You've got brows, lips and eyeliner. You've got Sculpted Studios who've just brought out a new lip range, which is amazing for dark lip neutralization and just general lips. You've got Hanami, Li, Euro and Color Essence. So you do have a lot of ranges that you can use. And I've worked with them. They are great. They are great. You just don't have that alcohol in there, which has been swapped out. And you've just got to get used to the different colorants. Okay. What color do you guys see? Tell me in the chat box. Look at that color and tell me what you see. Orange, red, yellow, orange, vermilion red, warm red, coral red, cherry red. Love this, guys. Orangey red, warm red, strong coral, pink red, muted orange, burnt orange, pink coral, 254. I love how specific that is. It's red 254. I know it. I love that. I love that. I love how we're starting to speak in colorants now rather than words. I love that, guys. Okay, good. So obviously it is a reddish color, but this is actually a pigment, and we're going to dive into what is in that pigment because we all perceive color slightly differently. You saw how many different variations of words that came out there. It was all sort of similar, but we describe colors differently. So I'm going to go through to the next slide. So this is a color by Sculpture Studios' new pigment line. It's called Gin. And this color that you see is made up of 4 colorants. So you might just see red, or you might just see orange, or you might see vermilion red, which is on very, it is right, but it is made up of different colors. So when you see a pigment, I want you to sort of think of, okay, what colors would be in that pigment to make this color. So you can see that it's a bright, vivid red. You can see that it's quite warm. So we need to start to correlate that to colorants. So we probably know that it's going to have a red base. It's going to have a bit of yellow in there. And to make it lighter and lighten the value, it has to have a bit of white in there. And it's got a bit of orange in there. So you need to think of your pigments as different colorants and different CIs that make that individual color. So when I look at a color now, I try and figure out the colorants in there, and then I have a look what's in there, sort of like a little game with myself. So the CI codes are the colorants that make up the color. We all get that, don't we? We're all on board. Okay. So you're probably thinking, right, this is all good information, but how do I find out exactly what is in my pigments that I'm using? I have done the work for you, in which you're going to see. but you will find this on the SDS sheets that the manufacturer has. So SDS sheets, the safety data sheets. This is an example of one from world famous ink, and you can see that this is what it will look like. And if you go to the box here, which is zoomed in here, you can see the list of colorants that makes that specific color. So this color, I think it's Pink Floyd, this color. Just by looking at that list of CIs, you can sort of tell what color it'll be. So first of all, you've got white at the top. So that tells us the color is going to be quite light, because when you have whatever's at the top means that is what is most in that pigment. So we've got white right at the top. So instantly we know that it's going to be a light color. We've got red 170, which we know from the pigment colorant download, that that's the bluish sort of cooler red. But then we also have red 122 in there, which is going to make it a little bit warmer. It's got no orange, it's got no yellow, it's got no blue. So when you mix white and red, what do you get? Pink. Okay, so this color is going to be pink. It's going to be a light pink. You can start to figure out what is in there. That's my favorite game. How sad is that? I love doing that. Okay, so also I'm going to go back. This is also displayed on the back of your bottles. Okay, so if you already have the pigment in your studio, look on the back of the bottle. It will list the CIs and the ingredients on the back, but you can also find this information on the SDS sheets. So sometimes, well, all the time, brands will display this in a slightly different format. So if you're looking for a box, which I was looking for ages for a box, it's not in a box on this particular brand. So this is a Hanami SDS sheet, and you can see this just sort of a quarter way down the page. The ingredients is in a list rather than a grid. Okay, so again, the first ingredient is aqua. We can see that, so we know it's going to be very liquid. Then it goes to the CI. So that is going to be the most dominant color in that pigment. Then it's got another CI, that's titanium dioxide, 77891. And then, you know, it goes on to all of the other ingredients. Okay, so if you're looking for a box, sometimes you have to figure out on the sheet what it is. Again, it's on the back of your bottles. Okay, here is a visual video of how to do it if you want to do it yourself. So go onto Google, search what you want to find. So I've typed in a black from Permablend, and they should be displaying this. It is a legal requirement to display the SDS sheets on there. So this is a certificate of compliance. You can just click your language and just see their certificate of compliance they've got there. But if you want to find the exact CI, you've got to go to the SDS sheet. On Permablend, you can actually download the whole range, which is really great. You can see there. We don't want to do that. We want to find the Pacific colorant, blended black I'm looking for. Click on the colorant on the website. Scroll down a little bit. You should find some information. And then you can see you've got your instructions and your product safety. So there is the SDS sheet. So you just have to search and find it. Make sure that it's the correct colorant at the top. Scroll down, and there is the colorants in the ingredients section. So you can see again, water, black 11, black 7. That is where you find them. But again, you have to do that for every single brand. What I've done is I've done it for you. What I've tried to do is make it as easy for you as possible. I call it the mega manual because I've tried to include all of the brands that I can think of that I use. So I've created this mega manual. It's got the popular pigment colorants in there, but it's got the full colorant list of every single CI number that is available. And I've got all the different swatch sheets for all of the different brands, including all of Permablend, Luxe, you've got Sculpted, Tina Davies, Evenflow, Hanami, Hanafi, Ever After, Colour Essence, Li, Biotech, World Famous Ink, Eternal Ink, and Mara Colours. And you can get this, it's 125 pages at the moment. And we are going to be continually adding to that when new brands come out. Of course, I will add and I'll make them for you. I'm just so excited to use it. So yeah, that is what I've done for you. Okay. Anna, do you prefer ingredients with low ingredients or a lot of different ingredients, or doesn't it matter? I'm going to answer that now. So I personally, it's more about the colorants really. I don't tend to, I feel like that is more mixing different pigments together. So I use a lot of different brands that have a lot of ingredients in, but what I try not to do is say you're going to mix like 4 or 5 colors together. I would not be doing that because it becomes a bit muddy. So you don't want to try, you want to try to not mix loads and loads of colors together. 2 or 3 colors is my max. I wouldn't be adding any more than that, but I don't have any issues with solo pigments and ingredients in there. No. Okay. Carolyn TD, I've got a whole section on that coming up. It's a big topic. We're going to get to that. So car park your questions for titanium dioxide. I'm looking at my Bora Bora color. How do I identify what the colorant color? So if you're looking at your bottle, on the back of it, you'll have the CI numbers listed. So what you need to do is look at the CI number, and you need to cross-reference that with the pigment colorant thing. Let me go back. This. So look at the back of your bottles, look at the CI numbers, and you need to match the CI number up to the colorant. So for example, if you're seeing 77891, that is titanium dioxide. If you're seeing 12475, that is red 170. So you've got to match the CI with the CI, okay? Eternal Ink, Gabriella, I found this. So what you will find when you start to look for the CIs, you will find some brands are not that transparent with what's in their pigment. And Eternal Ink was one of the harder ones for me to find the CIs. They are out there. You just have to look on a different website. So rather than looking on Eternal Ink, I was looking at the other distributors for Eternal Ink, and they had it on their one. But again, I've done most of it for you anyway. But I found Eternal Ink quite difficult. Colour Essence was extremely difficult to find the CIs, and a little bit of Li. So for me personally, it sort of puts me off using them. I'm going to be very transparent. I love the way that brands are being transparent and putting the CIs on the swatch sheets. I just think that's just amazing. Like, it saves us half the time to do it. And, you know, if you're asking us to put something in the skin, I think it's just common courtesy to put the ingredients on. It's like going into a supermarket and none of the food's labeled with the ingredients. So you will find that some brands are not transparent, but again, I've done it for you. Okay. Emma, is there a cool CI code and a warm CI code? Unfortunately not. They don't really correlate to the temperature. They will just correlate to the color. So no, it would be nice if they did that. Okay. Can you mix pigments from different manufacturers? Okay, this is a good question. I personally prefer to keep it in the same family. For example, if I'm using world famous ink, I will mix a little bit of Permablend or Tina Davies, because they're all made from Permablend. So I will mix world famous and Permablend together, but I wouldn't necessarily mix world famous with Li. It's not going to mix very well. The ingredients are very different. So if you think of your thick ingredients and your thin ingredients in the CIs, you know, it's going to get a bit muddy in the skin. So I would try to keep it to similar brands. Okay, let's move on to colorants. So we're going to talk about Pacific colorants, and we're going to talk a lot about TiO2. This is one of the most popular colorants in permanent makeup. Okay, so titanium dioxide is an inorganic compound with the formula TiO2. When this pigment is used, it's called titanium dioxide white, and the CI is 77891. So when we're working with lips, it's in a lot of lip pigments. It's in some brows, and it's in very low amounts of eyeliner. This is a very popular colorant for lips, and it's an inorganic. It's an inorganic colorant. The molecule size is absolutely giant. So it's the biggest molecule size. It's a bit more harder to enter the skin, but it is very stable. So a lot of the time they bond other colorants to TiO2 for stability, and this will increase the opacity massively. So what that means is it won't look too transparent. It will look a bit more opaque in color. Again, this is an inorganic colorant. So when you understand how to use this properly, it can be your best friend. But when you overload the skin with too much TiO2, it can be a problem. And this is what I mean, okay? So what happens if you use too much TiO2 irresponsibly? This is how TD does get his bad name, but this could be massively avoided. It's just understanding how to use TiO2. And what's happened here is the pigment value is higher than the natural lip tissue. So they've implanted a color that is much lighter than the natural lip tissue, and it's unnecessary amounts of TiO2. If you're working on light value lips, you do not need to saturate the skin with TiO2. You definitely do not need to try and correct things with TiO2. It causes massive problems long term, and it's more common than you think. It is common. So with the value, what I mean is, if there's a high value of white, we mean that there is a high load of white. So there's a lot of white in there. When a color has low value, there's more black, or there's less white. So when I say high load white, it's very light, okay? That can be quite confusing, but high load means high value. And this is what I mean. So this is relating more to inks now. So you can see that the high load white, you can see there's high load white in those two top colorants. So you've got creme de pink and you've got chakra pink. And you can, just by looking at those colors, you can see that there is TiO2 in there. Whereas the other two on this side, you can see that the value is lower and it's less white. There isn't actually any white in these two colors, and there's loads of white in these two colors. Again, there's not a wrong or right thing to use. It's just understanding who to use it on who. So this one here, these two here, you've got TD, white 6, very high load. And these two, you've got your organic red, and you've got organic red with your iron oxide red. And look how dark that is. You'd think there's purple in that color, but there actually isn't. That is just your organic red and your inorganic red. So there's no TiO2 in those two colors there. When you use the correct level of TiO2, you can create results like this, which is, long term, it's great. You don't have the build up, because every time you're doing a session, you need to adjust the amount of TiO2 you're putting in the skin. So when you've got a light value lip, you don't need to use a lot of TiO2. So you would use a color that doesn't have much in there. Whereas the first sessions that you're doing a neutralization, you will need the value. You need the TiO2 to shift the value. So this is, 3 years in, and we haven't got that chalky build up because we're reducing the level of TiO2 we're putting in the skin. Okay, so let's now talk about carbon black. So carbon black is the strongest colorant that we have in permanent makeup. We have carbon black 6 and 7, They share the same CI number, which can be quite confusing, but they are both very small molecule sizes and enter the skin extremely easy. But what you'll find is that Carbon Black, you have Black 6 and you have Black 7. They share the same CI. So the difference is Black 6 is called Channel Black, and this is pretty much, it's a very, very, very strong colorant. It's 19% organic, and it's likely found in your eyeliner and your tattoo pigments. Whereas Black 7 is called Thermal Black, and it's an inorganic. It's 99% inorganic. It's less potent, so it can be found in brows and lip pigments. So you need to look at what exact colorant is in your pigment. Is it Black 6 or is it Black 7? Because they're going to behave very differently in the skin. So you can see that Carbon Black 7 is, again, this is the less potent one, but we can see we have it here in Tina Davies I Love Ink wine color, which is a great color to modify to make something a bit more dark and earthy, a bit more of a mauve color. But we have Black 7 in there, which is mostly, it's 99% inorganic. And also it's used in a lot of eyebrow pigments. So whenever you have Carbon Black 7 in an eyebrow pigment, don't be too scared of it. You know, it's usually Black 7, and a lot of the time you need Black 7 to darken the value and make something darker and more potent. Whereas your Carbon Black 6 is mostly found in eyeliner pigments. So we can see this is Hanafi number 7, and you can see it's got Black 6 in there. So we know that Black 6 is very, very, it's pretty much organic, and it's extremely strong, and it's more stronger than Black 6. And you can see that Dynamic Black here, which is what we use for our tiny tattoos. Again, it's Black 6. So Black 6 is stronger than Black 7, okay? Extremely permanent. So this is what happens if you use, that should be Black 6, sorry, not Black 7. Black 6 used in an eyebrow. This will be extremely unforgiving. Black 6, not 7. This should be only used for eyeliner and tattoo treatments. So this is what happens. It becomes extremely bluish, dark, too saturated. So the only way to sort this out is to remove it. So don't even try to correct that. You're gonna, it's gonna stay in the skin pretty permanently. This is what you should not be doing. So using high carbon 6 in an eyebrow. So this is what I'll go back to. This is what the Carbon Black 7 looks like, softer. This is what the 6 looks like. So we do not want to create this. So understanding that, because it's not really spoke about that much. So understanding there is differences there. So let's talk a little bit about the fade out of Carbon Black. So Carbon Black is gonna fade out slightly cooler in the skin. We know that pigments all fade out cooler in the skin anyway, whether you're using a warmer color or a neutral color, it's gonna fade out cooler, because over time the skin is over the top of the pigment and it will cool down. So this is what the Carbon Black looks like when it fades. So this is why this is mostly your organic pigments. So this is why the organic pigments for eyebrows, they always put more yellow and red into the composition to help with the grey fade out. So you'll see that when you're working with organics on the eyebrows, you'll see that sort of orangey, yellowish sort of color staining in the skin, and they'll be quite warm when they leave, but they need to sort of be like that in order for them to heal more neutral and heal more true, because otherwise they'll just go grey straight away. So this is quite common for a organic Carbon Black in the skin on an eyebrow. Whereas if we're looking at an oxide black, colorant is not as stable, and it's got poor tintorial strength. So the iron oxide black tends to fade out more warmish. That should say light fastness. Sorry, I must have typed that really quickly, but you get gist. So if you see this, which is extremely common in eyebrows, is the iron oxide black has faded before the red and the yellow, which makes orange. So a lot of the time, the brands now, what they're doing is they're putting green in the eyebrow pigment to stop this warm fade out, which is what Tina has done in her new fade collection, which is amazing. So you should not get this warm fade out. Monica Ravani, you don't get this warm fade out, but some brands you still get that warm fade out if they've got uneven light fastness. So just understand that your inorganics generally fade out warmer, your organics generally fade out cooler. Okay, so Kerry, so the carbon black code on the bottle could be carbon black 6 or 7, and it's the CI sheets that tell us. Yes, okay, so this is where you need to look at your pigments. So when you're looking at your pigment, if you see carbon black code, it could either be carbon black 6 or carbon black 7. But on the SDS sheets, it should specify if it's carbon black 6 or carbon black 7. If they share the same CI number, so you will find that in the sheets. But again, I've done that for you in the colorant manual. I've listed all of them in there, so you know. But just know that your eyeliner pigments and your tattoo pigments are usually 6, and the other ones are 7. Okay, I want to just address this. So carbon black identifies as an inorganic, but it behaves like an organic. So when you see carbon black, it starts with 7 and above. So it identifies as an inorganic pigment, but we know that carbon black is an extremely small molecule, so it will behave more like an organic. So it can be quite confusing, but whenever you have carbon black in your pigment, it's going to behave more like an organic. Okay. So that can be quite confusing. So again, I want you to answer these questions, and then we are going to move along. Let's have a look at the results. So the colorant red 254, it starts with 5,6. So that is an organic colorant. So that's 76% got that right. So organic is the CI code has to be below 77. Which colorant is not EU REACH compliant? That was yellow 14 was non-EU REACH compliant. That was a hard one. It was a memory game. And then high value means high white load. Correct. So when something is high value, it's got loads of white in. Good. Let's now dive into more about specifics of the organics. Okay, so we're going to look at that more in detail now. So organic definition. So the organic definition is a presence of a carbon hydrogen bond in the pigment. So this means that the colors are more bright and vibrant, more translucent, wide range of colors. They are mostly found in pigments, increased risk to allergic reactions, and they do have very small molecule sizes. So you can see on the side here, they do have smaller molecule sizes and they enter the skin really easy. Okay, so let's move on. So that's the definition of organic. So I want to show you an example of using a pure organic. So when we talk about organics, we are not talking about a whole collection of pigments, because again, the organic refers to the specific colorant. So organic, there is not a lot of pure organics. A lot of them are hybrids now, but this is a pure organic red 170, which is a slightly cooler red. It's got slight sort of cool vibes in there. It's not too warm. So this is pure red 170, 12475. And look how much it has faded down. So it went in the skin extremely easy. We wanted to achieve a nice rosy color. remember that when you implant color into the skin, this is going to have a filter effect. So you are not going to get a pure red heel. So the pure red is the mass tone, and then the implanted color is what we have achieved once it's diluted down. You've got a layer of skin over the top. So this will always dilute down during the healing process. But it's, you know, it went in really well, and we chose that because we wanted to just achieve a nice rosy pink. So we use a pure organic colorant, quite bright, quite bright, vivid color. If we have an example of an eyebrow that is a pure organic, this is actually an organic hybrid, because whenever we have the presence of titanium dioxide, that makes it a hybrid, because we know that TD is an inorganic. So whenever you see TD mixed in with your other organics, it's a hybrid. But remember that we have more organics than inorganics. So this makes it an organic hybrid, but it's going to behave more like an organic. So this is why it's important to understand your exact colorants, because, for example, we have organic yellow, we have titanium dioxide, we have organic red, we have carbon black, which looks like an inorganic, but it behaves more like an organic. So it's like a shapeshifter. Carbon black is like a shapeshifter. So it looks like an inorganic, but it behaves more like an organic. Then we have orange 13, which is an organic. So we have more organics than inorganics. So that is going to behave more like an organic color. And we can see we've got a really nice eyebrow. It's saturated with color, very long lasting. We know that it's going to be more long lasting in the skin. Okay. So again, it's not something that you feel, it's not something that is wrong or right. You've just got to pick what is best for you and what is best suited for your client. Here is an example of an organic eyeliner. I absolutely love Hanafi for eyeliner. I think they've really nailed it with the what's in their pigments. So here we have Carbon Black 6, which again, it looks like an inorganic, but it's going to behave like an organic, and it's the stronger one. It's going to be quite potent, and they have pre-mixed in yellow and red, which makes orange. So that is really going to help with the blue shift that you get, which is why I love the deep black for the eyeliner. You can see that the black's actually stayed black because we have that buff of the warm in there. So this is going to behave like an organic. And you can see down here, you can see that how much it does retain in the skin. So this is healed lash line over 3 years. So no top up is needed. It's extremely potent, the Carbon Black 6. If we compare that to a pure Carbon Black 6 with no modifier, you can see that it's gone bluish. And it's not exactly like, it looks quite pretty, it's nice, but whenever you use pure Carbon Black with no modifier, it is going to go blue over time. There is no way around it. You are going to get more of a cooler, bluer heel in the skin. So, and that's fine. We was doing a cover up here, so she didn't mind that sort of colouring. So I just used the pure Enchanted Onyx on its own, which is fine. But just understand that over time, that will gradually get cooler and cooler, which is why I love the Hanafi Deep Black, because it's got that buff of the warm in there, okay? But again, it's just understanding what you're using. If you're using a colour that's pure Carbon Black, it's going to go blue. So why would you use organics? So why would you use organic inks? So you would use a pure organic ink or an organic hybrid if you want to achieve something that's a bit more brighter. It's more for intermediate and advanced artists because it's it stays in the skin extremely long time. It's not very forgiving. So if you make any mistakes, then you're going to have to get removal. And it's best for long-term results. So for example, you've got your Permablend, which is pretty much an organic, is, you know, with the exception of TD and Carbon Black, this is going to behave like an organic. So it's going to be extremely long lasting in the skin. Eyeliner, I always use organics for eyeliners because I want that black to stay black. If we use in the deep black here, it doesn't fade very well. So, you know, if your client is having a thicker eyeliner, you need to make sure that they want it for a long time. And lips, you would use an organic if you want to achieve a bright color, healed with minimal fading. So they're not going to fade in 12 months. It'll be much longer than that. Okay. So why would you, so now let's talk about inorganics. Okay. So inorganics, the definition of an inorganic color is a larger molecule size, has poor tinctorial strength, making it volatile in the skin. We know that the colors are more earthy and more dusky and more opaque. They're mostly found in cosmetic brands. They might feel slightly warmer, and it contains more metals. They do not go in the skin super easy. They have a larger molecule size. We already know that. So here is an example of a pure inorganic line. So the pure inorganic line, this is by Monica Ravani, who has got her eyebrow collection. I love this range. It's really, really great. It's great for soft and natural results. And you can see all of the CIs are above 7.7. So you've got 7.74, etc. So they're all inorganics. There is not one organic color in there, which is a really good option for something that's going to be very soft in the eyebrow. And here's an example of what it will look like in the skin. So you've got your healed. This is a healed after one session. Still goes in the skin extremely well, but this will be faded in 12 months. So I absolutely love going to inorganics for eyebrows. I use a lot of inorganics for eyebrows, and then I use more organics for lips. But you can see the fade out is more so, which is really nice and pretty, really soft and delicate. Here's an example of using an inorganic in an eyeliner. So using an inorganic in an eyeliner, it's not going to be super easy to enter the skin. And we know that because of the formation of the larger molecule sizes. But you can use that to your advantage, because if you have a client with very high capillary rich lids, like this client here, then I would not tattoo her with a carbon black, because you know that the molecule size is extremely small and it's going to travel up those capillaries. So she is a perfect candidate for an inorganic pigment, which would be iron oxide black. Again, carbon black looks like an inorganic, but it behaves more like an organic. So when I say inorganic black, I mean iron oxide black. And this is the healed result. So it heals more like a grayish color. It doesn't heal to jet black. Here's an example of using an inorganic on a lip. So you can see, comparing that to the red lip that we was just on, you can see that the inorganic is more dusky, a bit more earthy, a bit more of a nudish color. So typically your nude colors are going to be inorganic, because we want to create that dull, earthy-like feel. So they're great to use for clients with lighter lips if they don't want a lot of a bright color there. But usually your nude color has presence of inorganics, iron oxides in there. But this is a pure inorganic because we have 7777. So there's no organic present in this formation. So why would you use inorganics? So you would use inorganics if you are working on a younger client. I absolutely would love, you know, I don't tie younger clients into something that's super permanent because of, you know, they always change their mind, and you don't want to tie them into something for like over 5 years. You want them to have something that they can change. So I always use inorganics for eyebrows. Sometimes I'll use an organic for an eyebrow if they want something a bit more stronger, but I do love to use inorganics for brows. Eyeliner, again, if they want something soft and they've got loads of capillaries, it's great. And lips to achieve muted color once healed. But you do have the risk of it becoming volatile over time, which means that you get the color changes if you are using a lot of inorganics on the lips. So, you know, a lot of hybrids are better than pure inorganics on the lips. And here we have some visuals, okay? So the visuals of the difference between your iron oxides, which are your inorganics, compared to your organics. So we have your dull earthy red and your bright organic red. Inorganic yellow with your bright organic yellow. So there's a massive difference in the vibrancy here. And then again, remember that iron oxide black 11 is a pure iron oxide. Your carbon black, I class it more as an organic because how it behaves in the skin. It's got an extremely small molecule, but the CI is saying that it's an iron oxide. But it will behave like an organic in the skin. Okay, so let's move on to hybrids now, and then we're going to see where we're at. I'm just a bit conscious of the time. So we're going to get through this section, and then we are going to have a little recap, okay? So moving on to hybrids. So hybrids are a mix of both. There is no such thing as a hybrid colorant. It's a mix of your organic and your inorganic in the same pigment. So hybrid definition is you have the presence of organic and inorganic in the composition. Hybrid is a spectrum. So when we talk about hybrid, we need to understand that it's not as straightforward as you have the same amount of colorants in the pigment. So, for example, Permablend for an eyebrow, they are going to behave more like an organic because they've got more organic colorants in their formation and they've got titanium dioxide. Whereas the new range for Tina Davies Fade, this is also a hybrid, but we have more inorganic colorants than organic. So this is going to behave more like an inorganic. So when we talk about hybrid pigments, think of a spectrum, and this is why it's so important to understand your CI codes, because the brand can say, oh, it's a hybrid, but what end of the spectrum is it going to behave? So Permablend for me is basically more organic, and then your other ranges with more inorganics are going to behave more like an inorganic. Okay, and it goes the same with the lips. Again, you can get hybrid lips with the mixture of organics and inorganics in there, but what is most in that pigment? So we can see that this one here, we have 3 organics and 1 inorganic, so that's going to behave more like an organic. And then we have this one with 2 inorganics and 1 organic, so that's going to behave more like an inorganic. Okay, so this is where it really starts to make sense. And then we have the same for eyeliner. Again, the exact same principle. What is most in that composition? Here's some examples of the hybrid Fade, which is this is by Fade by Tina Davies. I love these pigments. So they're a hybrid because we've got the composition showing inorganics and organics in there, so you get a really nice heel. They've retained amazingly, and they will stay and fade over the next 12 months. And here's an example of another hybrid, but this is going to behave more like an organic hybrid again, because look at the CIs. We've got organic orange and organic red with TD, so we've got 2 organics and 1 inorganic. So that's going to behave more like an organic. Okay. So I want to just quickly touch on what's happened here. So this is a fade out that has happened with, I'm going to explain, because you might have seen this in your studio. So this is, why has this happened? This has happened with the pigment choice was too high load TD. So there's a chalky sort of vibe coming through. It was likely a nude color where it had presence of iron oxide red, iron oxide black, and iron oxide yellow. So using pure inorganics on a lip can become quite unforgiving. So that's why I like to use more hybrid organics or organics. You know, you can get away with using these sorts of colors on lighter lips, but if your client already has a lot of pink or red, you don't want to use a color with too high value white and the presence of inorganics in there, because this is what can happen. Okay, so you're going to say goodbye?
We are indeed.
Oh, thank you guys. This replay will be available on the platform, so you'll get the replay instantly on the 4th. You can rewatch it. But yeah, thanks Scott as well for all of your techie wizardry.
Not a problem. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you all very, very soon, and we'll answer every single question we can get round to. So thank you so much, and we'll see you all very, very soon.
See you on Instagram.